first off, I guess, how can you get started? I think the easiest way to get started building your own self-improvement systems is to go grab the tools and SDKs that folks are using. In this case, Claude Code is by far, I think, the most popular one at the moment, and that's what I'm going to show you one way to do that. Another one that makes this pretty easy is Code. Most recently, I think GitHub Copilot CLI is also showing you a lot of opportunity for how to build in sort of the type of hooks that I'm talking about. Even if you're just building raw agents with LangChain or AutoGen or something else, you can still give your agents the ability to do that self-reflection. And the way to get there then is to really ask yourself those questions, do that thinking about thinking, and start putting small patterns together into bigger patterns, and then put those together into bigger patterns. I like to say that fractals are your friend when it comes to designing agent systems. And one sort of little example of that would be, let's say you have an author-critic pattern, right? And maybe it's author-critic and then person who implements the feedback from the critic. And those three agents are a pattern in the micro, and they might be part of a larger workflow for developing, say, a set of code. But then that might roll up to a larger system that involves that code in an overall creation of a presentation or a website. And you might have another set of author, critic, implementer that looks at the output of several different work streams together, right? And then gives feedback that then flows all the way down to the bottom of the system and then flows back up. And that's what I mean by kind of building fractals of patterns upon patterns. I want to dive in and show you a little bit about a few pieces here. How to do reflection, sort of leaning into building some tools and skills, and doing some customization for Claude Code specifically, and injecting context. We got a little bit of time, so yeah. So first, let's talk real quick about how Claude Code and some of the other agentic coding tools work. Essentially, the way that Codex, GitHub Copilot CLI, Claude Code work is an event-driven agentic loop, and Claude is, I think, doing the best at illustrating this, making it easy for developers. It's an agent that it can respond to events. Submitting your prompt is an event. Starting, stopping, that's an event. Using a tool like Bash or writing this to-do list, those are events, right? And it can also send events and you can configure what Claude calls hooks, which is just a way to programmatically respond to an event. Anthropic has published their SDK, which is perfect for sort of building your own agents around this without using the Claude Code interactive tool, right? And so I want to talk about reflection specifically, right? Reflection is where we can learn from how things are going and have a look at what happened during a session, reflect on that session, and then come up with some feedback. So Claude Code specifically keeps its hooks configuration in this file is called settings.json. And you can see here I have a start hook, I have a stop hook. Let me get my cursor back on the screen. There. Get this out of the way. And you can specify an arbitrary path for these things, right? And within that hook, then your job is to respond to the things that Claude sends you and decide what to do with it, right? And so here in the stop hook, right? Claude is sending us the transcript of the session that it had, and we get to operate over that transcript. And one of the things that's interesting is that you can call Claude Code from within the hook. So in this case, I want to run reflection on the transcript from the session, but I want to use Claude Code to do that reflection. And so I've got a prompt that's going to ask it to fill out a template, based on what happened in the session. Was the user frustrated? What kind of interactions? many tool calls did you do? Can you suggest anything that should happen? But you want to avoid an infinite loop, because if you call Claude Code and it's running reflection on your transcript, there's a stop event at the end of that. And so you just use a really simple semaphore here. And so I've got some code that sets up that semaphore. And then once we're actually running reflection, right, we invoke Claude with the Claude Code SDK, and we pass it the transcript. And then it has a chance to go and analyze the transcript with our prompt and come up with, some feedback. And so, really, really simple here. I just have it fill out this template. Like, what did we do? What kind of things did you observe? And then there's some things you can improve. And you'd be surprised at just how effective that super simple feedback loop is. And then showing the user a set of things that they might make better. Now, this is just a really simple example I cooked for this show, but you can make much more sophisticated examples, and there's a bunch you can find on my GitHub about how to do this more automated, right? And so I've built some systems that went off and made multiple generations of themselves by doing reflection over the tasks they were given, and then going and modifying their own code and taking on the task again, et cetera, in a loop. What I found is that that's a really good way to discover where you need guardrails. If you can experiment safely in a Docker container or online VM and let a system evolve, finding all the ways that it goes into corners that you didn't expect ends up being a really interesting way to discover some of those guardrails. And so, in addition to sort of the stop hook, there's also session start hooks. And this is your opportunity, if you learn something from the reflection part of the session, to actually take things that you pulled out, extracted as guidelines or guardrails, and inject them back into the session, whether it's adding context to the user prompt, which is good for something you want to do every time, every single turn, or adding context to the session as a whole, which is more like augmenting the system prompt, right? Or you can have reflection injection that's for just very specific subagents, right? And then this is an interesting way also to do customization and to use hooks to kind of inject preferences. And so, like, a fun one that I like to play with is I tell the model that it always has to talk to me like a pirate, right? And you get some really interesting conversations as a result. It makes interacting with the model a little bit more fun, and you can go on, right? And like I said, the important part here is that this helps you figure out where you want to build guardrails and have to give it guidance. And so if you find in your prompting that you're giving specific instructions over and over again, and one I like to talk about is like the zero BS philosophy, where if you've done any vibe coding, then you know that without specific guidance, you have to tell the model over and over again that it should not do faked APIs or faked data or unimplemented functions, because it will do a bunch of that if not given that guidance, right? And so I have some really specific instructions in there. There are guardrails that help sort of set that zero BS context at the beginning, and then check it again at the end over and over again. Right? And then, exercise that process of identifying patterns, building tools for those patterns, moving the tools to commands. And from there, you can build your own agents for specific types of tasks. And then a new one that Claude has rolled out, which I think is really interesting for its progressive disclosure, are the Claude Code skills. But the basic idea is that there's a body of knowledge which an agent can access, and you can pull from that body of knowledge sort of a little bit at a time as needed, right? But yeah, when something, we're constantly in the process here of moving things from fuzzy and semantic to deterministic and knowable. And when you can do that, anytime you can do that, move those things into code, right? Move things out of the prompt, the semantic world, into code, and leave the things that are less difficult to determine with code Yeah. And so, what if you're not using Claude Code? There's lots of other ways to do the same kinds of things. In AutoGen, we sort of pioneered building event-driven agent frameworks, and that's now evolved into the Microsoft agent framework. That's a good place to look. The OpenAI agent framework also sort of adopted a lot of the patterns from there. There's several others that are out there and available. I strongly endorse the Claude Agent SDK. You don't have to use Claude Code to use the Claude Agent SDK. But I find they've made things really easy. They kind of have built in a lot of solid stuff, and their tool use is great. But again, it goes back to doing that structured thinking about which pieces of the system do you want to learn, or do you want to get better? What are the data sources you want them to look to? And then where are you going to build the loops that are going to collect the data that you're learning from, understand that data deeply, and then sort of inject it back into the agent's workflow? How is the agent going to get access to the things that you learn as you learn? And then doing all of that in an experimentation space where you can learn what are the boundaries, what are the guardrails I need to set.